Well, good evening, everyone. We a couple minutes late here starting, but if you could take your seats, we'll get going here. Well, that's thinking. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. So we generally ask if there's anyone here who's not been to our meetings before. Not to put you on the spot, but we like to find out if you might be a cousin of ours. So, if someone has not been here before, could you raise your hand? Okay. We're not picking on you. So if you could stand and say your name and what surnames you're researching, and they don't have to be Durham names. We have people here with research all through the English-speaking world and some of the non-English-speaking world too. So if you could do that, that'd be great.
Hi, I'm Caroline, Ostrom Best. So I'm researching Ostrom and researching Best and researching Obeah.
Okay. And what names are you researching?
Okay, my name is Diane Martin, and I'm researching, well, there's 4 main lines. So, Adwin, which goes back to Germany.
Oh, yeah.
Young, which is mainly through England. Bell, which goes to Ireland. And Van Camp, which is Dutch.
Dutch through New Amsterdam or straight from Holland?
Straight from Holland.
And Bob Bell, where are your bells? Okay. There's a couple of things. Let's see if I can remember what I put in the PowerPoint. So the conference is in about 10 days in Ottawa. The online registration is now closed, but if you have a burning desire to go to Ottawa, they will take walk-in registrations. It's at the Algonquin College up in Ottawa. The conference 2018, if I remember correctly, the dates are June 1 to 3 of 2018, and it's going to be in Guelph, and they've been asking for volunteers. And I have had my arm twisted.
You're going to try to get a computer.
Okay. I've had my arm twisted, and I'm going to be on the program committee. So if anybody here feels that they could contribute to Conference 2018, they'd be more than welcome. The One World, One Family, Nick has been handing out bookmarks on that. It's sponsored by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and it is August the 19th. Yes. And early bird is July 9th. So if you go online, oneworldoneFamily.org, I believe, .com.org, Google it. And it's through Eventbrite that you can get your ticket. Anybody who's an OGS member here, did you remember to vote on the bylaws? Did you find the email that they sent to you? Okay, good. So we talked about that. OGS webinars that are going to be happening through the summer. We've got Melissa Barker. It's not all online, researching in archives. That's the July 6th one. It's the first Thursday of the month. And then we've got in August, how research plans can up your genealogical game. And that's what's happening between now and when we get together again in September.
How do you get into these webinars?
Here we go. So when you are on the ogs.on.ca website, Are you an OGS member by any chance? No. Okay. So ignore the first arrow on the right that says sign in. You don't have to do that. Go down several to the one that says webinars. And then the second one down, upcoming webinars, and you can click on the register button. And you can watch it live. They do record them, which is the next button down, the recorded 2017 webinars, but you can only get in there if you are an OGS member. So you have to attend it live, but it's open to the public. Okay? Now, you guys all know that I'm really into education. So, there are other webinars out there, and you've heard me talk about Legacy Family Tree webinars before. The website is familytreewebinars.com. And just like OGS, they let you register and watch for free. And in fact, they even leave it free for about 4 or 5 days after. So here are the next few that are coming up. Actually, there's another one on Minnesota research, but I didn't clip that particular one. But they've got one, How Harry Potter can Teach You About DNA. And Blaine Bettinger, who is presenting it, is one of the leading guys in DNA for genealogy. He's actually going to be at conference talking this year. And then that's on June 14th. And on June 16th, we've got Diane Southard, who is another good DNA speaker, Next Steps with Your Autosomal DNA. So if you got research, if you've actually done your DNA and you don't know what to do with your results, she's going to tell you. And when I was playing around on there, they actually have a free section that you can look at anytime. And quite often they're more on the commercial side of things. They're about Legacy Family Tree program, or a program called Clues, or newspapers, or different things like that. But there is a section that has a lot of free webinars, and you can access them anytime. I've already talked about One World, One Family, and it's going to actually take place, the church is at Thornton and Roslyn here in Oshawa. And I don't know if it's going to continue here. Last year it was in Etobicoke, the year before it was in Brandon. So I got a feeling it's going to start moving around the province. So grab it this year. And it's always excellent speakers. In fact, I think, Steve, you're speaking?
Well, there's a downside.
Really? Okay. We'll talk to you on the break. So at this point, we're going to flip over to our featured presentation with Sher Leetooze. Now, Sher has spoken to our branch many times. She's also spoken at conferences. She's always a wealth of information, so I'd like everybody to welcome Sher.
Well, good evening, and I'm glad to see so many people out this evening when we didn't know whether or not it was going to rain. This evening I'm going to talk about the problem that a lot of us have, no family photos. Or, when you get back so far, photos hadn't been invented yet, and if your family was anything like mine, they could not afford to commission a portrait. Mine were dirt farmers for many, many, many centuries, so we don't have a lot back beyond, I would say, the late 1800s. So it's been a challenge for my family history book, and I'm sure it's a challenge for yours as well. What I decided to do was use photos from around the places where they lived. Part of Mum's family came from the parish of Fife Head Neville in Dorset. And what you see here is the old Packhorse Bridge. It was there since Roman times. And so I know my ancestors that lived there in 1598, that's as far back as I can go on that line, would have walked across that bridge, if not daily, then probably weekly. So they knew that bridge. It's part of the family history. And so it made a very good visual in the family history book about that very early parish.
So Sher, you found a modern picture and an old one there?
Yes, this bottom one that you see was, I think, from the late 1800s. And this top one is a modern picture. Now, the bottom one, of course, is a black and white. But when I put it in the book, I put it in as a black and white, this top one. Because when photos came out, and in a lot of old history books, the photos are all black and white. And so, and if you're going to have your book printed, it's much cheaper to have grayscale photos printed than full color. Keep that in mind. And nobody minds looking at a black and white photo. We've been doing it all our lives. So, if you want to find photos like the old Packhorse Bridge from your parish, you can just go to Google or Google Images, put in the parish name, and see what comes up. You're going to find all sorts of wonderful things. That's how I found this one, because I didn't know what was there when I first started out. If you find a photo that you think is going to make good visual for your book, click on it. If you're in Google Images, then you'll get a picture of the photo and you'll get choices across on the right-hand side. One is go to the page where that picture comes from, and one is view the photo. And you can view the photo, get a really good high-resolution copy of that photo that you can right-click on it and copy it to put it into your work. Then go back and go to the page so that you can get full information on that photo, the URL of the source, because you're going to have to cite that in your book to say where you got it, because let's face it, you don't want to call it your photo if it's not. Oh, we went backwards.
F5. Was it?
The arrow keys right on the bottom of the keyboard might be the best thing to use then.
Might be.
It stopped. Dan.
Oh, yes, you're right, F5 to get it to start its slideshow again.
Yeah.
Is that F5? I think it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I froze it up.
Let's know I'm not the only talent.
So now we can blame the projector, not the computer.
This is weird.
This is weird, yeah.
Slideshow. We'll do it
Well,
another
I
version.
might have to go.
Start from this slide.
It's great.
I did, I froze it up.
Start from this slide, eh? It's not.
It's grayed
It
out.
says F5 and it's grayed out, yeah. So. maybe
Well,
we'll
let's
load
just
it.
go to the next one and see if we can see it.
Well, I think we're going to have to load it again.
Oh, load it again.
Yeah.
Right. Well, by the time we're finished tonight, you're probably going to have 30 ideas on visuals that you can use throughout your book. And I'm going to be quoting from this little book that I wrote about Mom's family. And most of the photos are in the front because the back half is all family group charts. But I've also included the pub in a color photo because it was so pretty, all that brickwork.
We're back.
Go to the next one, Dan.
I doubt if my people went to the pub. I really doubt it. I think the women in my family would never have allowed it. Knowing the ones that I know. And they got it from somewhere. So, but I thought they might like to read it, you know, and see just what the parish was like when their ancestors were there. Something else I found was a will. Now you can go online and find wills from just about every county in Great Britain. By the way, I'm going to be talking about Great Britain with this because that's where most of my research is done. But you can probably find wills for just about any country where you're researching. I ordered mine from the county record office, from the Dorset County Record Office. And of course, it's all written in that ancient, old, flowery writing. And I took weeks, probably months, to transcribe it. But it is in the book. You can see on the right, I've made it really pale, and I've used it as a chapter cover. And then later in that chapter, I've used it right on the page, and the following page then is my transcription so that people can see what was left. That's a good visual. They can see what the old handwriting was like. Even though our ancestors may themselves have been illiterate, someone always wrote a will for them, and it was pretty flowery and pretty difficult to read. There, oh.
Down arrow.
Down arrow.
There we
Oh,
are.
okay. There we go. The parish church, that is another source of great visuals. Every parish in Great Britain has had its church photographed a gazillion times. Everybody and their brother photographs the church. It was very important to our families. You were christened there, you were married there, your funeral was there, and you're buried in the churchyard. And you spent the good part of every Sabbath in that building. And you froze your butt in winter. You probably froze it in winter. Those stones are cold to sit on no matter what time of year. The top one is a 1870s photograph that was posted on I believe, the parish website. And the bottom one was taken about 100 years ago, and it's the interior of the church. And if you can see that close up, it's chairs, no pews. And so that tells us something about the life and times of our ancestors. You don't necessarily have to go to the parish to find out little gems like this. So that makes good visuals for your family story. Down arrow.
Yep.
I'm getting the hang of this. Cemeteries and gravestones. At the end of a particular person's chapter is where you would put the cemeteries and gravestones. That is the end of their life. That is the end of your chapter. The top photo here on the left was Horn Cemetery on Wolf Island off of Kingston. And how we stayed long enough to get those photographs, I don't know, because the mosquitoes were as big as we were. It's in a deep, dark wood, and it's low ground, and it's sodden wet. And I think the mosquitoes wanted to carry us off to the States, because just down the road is the ferry that goes across to New York. But we did get it photographed, and they're rather unique. The carvings on the old tombstones are quite interesting sometimes. The next photo on the right is laying flat in the ground out at Purple Hill. And every time we go out there and to look for the grave, about every 5 years or so, I stop by. And I have to go for a search in the approximate area where I remember it and clean it all off again. And I think it's up for development now, that corner. It's going to be lost. So I'm glad I have that photograph. The bottom one is at Morwen Stowe in Cornwall, England. Most of my ancestors are buried there, but without stones. So an overview of the cemetery where they are suffices when there's no stone to take a picture of. The dwelling places. I've been very fortunate in finding my ancestors' dwelling places. A distant relative of mine that I found through doing family research went to Dorset one year on his holidays, and he emailed me this picture. This is a little hamlet of Morden. Now, the family lived at Bear Regis for a while, and Morden was just out the road, maybe a mile. Just a little hamlet, a little string of cottages along the road. It's a little bigger now. It has its own pub now. They didn't have to walk all the way into Bear Regis. But one of these cottages on that row is the one where my ancestors lived, because that's all there was. That's all there was in the village. Now, the big White House on the right, That's in St. Hugh in Cornwall. And my ancestors there were butchers for the parish. And they had the butcher shop and the house in that building. And I was very fortunate to talk to a local and say, I'm doing research on the Williamses. He was the butcher. He said, I know. And I said, do you know which house he lived in? He said, right there. And he says, the butcher shop was in the corner. And so it was really good that I'd found a local historian with the first guy I stopped on the road. So that was very fortunate. And if you're in a little small place with only 3 or 4 houses in it, everybody will know the history anyway. So stop anybody and ask. Knock on any door and ask. They love it when you knock on their door and ask questions like that. They invite you in and give you tea and biscuits. Oh, it's great fun. The bottom photo down here with the big stone building, that's in Ulster, in Armagh, near the little village of Rich Hill. And my ancestors lived out there in the 1820s. They came out here in 1830. That was a fine big house at one time, but it's now part of the old farm buildings. And there's just a lot of old junk stored in it right now. The little log cabin is where they lived when they came out from Armagh. And that's in Quebec, near Franklin, in Hinchinbrook Township. And my distant cousin went down and took a photo of it and met the people that live there today. And it's a beautiful, snug little house, still being lived in after nearly 200 years. Isn't that great? So that's the kind of homes that some of my ancestral branches lived in. And if you do enough looking and enough searching, you'll find it. Now, the only way I found Mulladry Cottage, the great big stone one, I found a burial record from Rich Hill for, what was their name? Blair. And they had lived at Mulladry. And I thought, Mulladry, okay, Mulladry. And I'm looking and looking for Mulladry, and I find out it's the name of a cottage. And so I went on the internet and found an old 1830s OS map, Ordnance Survey, and looked all around Rich Hill, and there it was, a little wee black dot on the map called Mulladry. So I got out a modern OS map, and I blew it up to the same size on my computer screen, printed off a copy of the old one and the new one, went to a window with lots of sun and overlaid them against the sun so I could see where all the dots matched. Mulladry Cottage was still there. You can do that if you can find it on an old map, find it on a new map, see if it's still there. So when we went over. We spent how many $1,000s to get that photo? That is a jewel, let me tell you. And we got to the village, and the president of the local historical society put us in the car and drove us around. And when he had to go to work, he gave us to the mayor of Armagh and made her drive us around. We had a great day, let me tell you. But there was Mulladry Cottage, and he said that should be it, because he's going like this with the old 1830s map as he's driving, and he said this should be it. So there was a fellow coming in the farmyard with a tractor and wagons. This is apple country, by the way, and he was just loaded with apples. And I said, is this Mulladry Cottage? And he went, I said, can I take a picture? Put the tractor in gear, and away he went. That was it. He didn't care. So we have a picture of old Mulladry Cottage. So you can find things like that if you're willing to take the extra steps to go and get it. In fact, if you can find the local historical society and ask somebody there to go out and take a picture, they probably will, and email it to you. These are the old maps. The top one is an old 1830s OS map. The bottom one is a modern OS map. And you can see that the names of the farms are on the old one, the same as they're on the new one. All the buildings are marked on the old one, the same as on the new one. They might look a little different, but they're marked just the same, just the same. The third map is a more or less a topographical map, but it's more or less hand done as well. It's not one of these fancy ones that show all the shadows. That's really hard to look at when you see some of these old 1700 maps and they put the shadow on the side of the mountain and things, and you just can't read what's been written there. It's too busy. This one is a lot easier to read. It's a 1775 Armstrong map from Ayrshire, and it shows the contours of the land, so you can see if there were hills and dales where your people lived. Usually they went to market following the valley, if it was that far away. On a modern OS map, all you've got is the contour lines drawn on, and you have to learn to read the numbers on those contour lines. The higher the number, the higher the mountain, the higher the hill, because that's in feet or meters. And then between each of those, you may see pathways. So when you put a map in your family story, really go into detail about what's on there. Grandma and Grandpa would have followed that path, and you can even draw a circle on it to market every Wednesday or whenever market day was in their area. So you can learn a lot about your family from old records like this, old maps. This is just a blow-up of that bottom one that I showed you. And most of the buildings are individual buildings, but usually up at the end of a farm lane, it's one big blob. The house and all the outbuildings are kind of joined together. The same as a little village along the roadway. It'll be one strip of buildings. I'm trying to see here. But it's not one building. It's usually many little ones side by side. But for the lack of space, they put it all together. But they're very interesting when you know how to read them. I've also done some work on this side of the pond using old maps. Now, this is from a Belden's Atlas from 1887, and a little blow up in the corner. This is just north of Bowmanville and Liberty Street. I haven't got a clicker, so, but if you see that dark fish-shaped thing, up one side of it is Liberty Street going up. And two concessions above, there's a dot. That's this blow-up. One is the school, one is the church. And if you don't know what your ancestral home looked like, you can get these maps. Most libraries have a good set of Belden's Atlases from all over the place. Now, I went to the museum and found a picture of the school, and I went out and took a picture of the church, and I put them together on a copy of the map, and we're going to pretend that Zach Pollard, you can see the ZA, Zach Pollard lived there, and when he looked out his front window, there's the school his kids went to, there's the church the whole family went to, and if we had a picture of Zach Pollard's house, that could go down on the north side of the street and show his house, and that's your ancestral neighborhood. So you can do the same thing with your ancestor if they were rural folk. Now, if they were not rural folk, again, go to the Belden's Atlas, see the little map of the town or the village. If the place isn't too big, then the names will be spelled out. If there's quite a few properties within the village, then it's probably just initials, unless they were big landowners and their name is across 3 or 4 lots. But you know what your ancestors' initials were, and if you knew they lived at some place like Newtonville or Hampton, where it's just initials on these little wee lots, you can find them. And it's worth taking a look. Take a magnifying glass to it and give it a good scrutiny. Or you can go on Google Maps and you can put the little man down on your map and have him walk around your ancestral neighborhood until you find the house. The 1911 and the
Do you have Tim Horton in your family there?
Yes. That's an ancestral must. That's out behind my house, by the way. I have no idea what I was about to say.
Sorry.
Go to the 1911 census or the 1921 census, and your ancestral, if they were around in that time, that section of your ancestors, their address is given, and then you can go to Google Maps and find it today. But be aware that a lot of the side roads and way, way out in the country are not done. You will get so far up the road and your little man can't go any further. That's because they haven't photographed it.
And I've found renumbering of houses, like my grandparents had 71 River Road, and now it's 871, but
There you go.
I don't know if they
And
always did
also, until the 1950s, there were no street addresses in Newcastle. And other little villages may have been the same. They just lived on Elm Street. So who knows what the address might have been. Personal items. The top photo of the spoons is a set of spoons that came down in the family from a 5 times great-grandmother from Yorkshire. And her initials are up on the top of the spoons, S for Stevenson. And my mother always said, "Oh, no, that's something Grandma picked up at a yard sale." And one day I found who the S belonged to, and I went to Mom and I said, "Nope, no yard sale for this. This was her spoons." Perfume atomizers. Way back then, you were very careful about your perfume, and you just went, and that was it. You didn't use too much. And this was a prized possession of a woman because they were hard to come by and they were expensive. So if something like that has been passed down, or a lovely pocket watch from great-grandpa, makes a great photograph. And it helps you understand that ancestor a little more. If you've got pieces of furniture that were in the family, make sure you photograph them. If you didn't get anything and it all went to your cousins, ask them to photograph it and send you the photo so that you can put it in the book. And ask them how they came to get it, because then you give a provenance to your piece. And if you watch the roadshow, provenance is everything. So make sure you find out how that distant cousin got that piece, and put that in. Put that in, because she may have been great-grandma's favorite. You never know. How to present your personal items? Well, I just put a picture of Grandma and her dog and her atomizer and her little bowl, a little Irish bowl, an Irish pin and an Irish ring, and it's no longer with the others. I've got it on here now, so it's an Irish bloodstone. Her hat pin. Oh, if you had known my Grandma and her hats, they were not just hats, they were hats. And so she had many, many, many hat pins. She had to hold that giant thing on her head, especially in a wind. So you could put them together in a little collection like that, or you could photograph them one at a time and just do a collage on a page for great-grandma's stuff. And you kind of get to know the person, what quality of life she liked, or he, if it's things from a fellow. When you're getting up into an era closer to our time, it's often easier to have things that belonged to Grandma or Mom and Dad. Books, for instance, inscribed to you on your birthday or for Christmas or something like that. And a photograph of the handwriting, the book and the handwriting inside. Tools or farm implements. If a lot of farm folk had their picture taken doing their chores. I've got one of my dad's aunt up in her skirts, believe it or not, up on a hay rick, bringing in hay in skirts. And there she is working on the farm. So we know what kind of farm implements they use because they're using it, and it's great. Cars or buggies, even with or without horses, it doesn't matter. Even if you don't have a picture of one that belonged to them, something from their era would show how they lived. The same with clothing styles. Kitchen utensils. If you don't know what the 1950s kitchen looked like, go to any Salvation Army. It's lined up on the shelf. And this is what Mum used. Oh my God, I can't believe Mum used that kind of stuff. Well, there it is. So you can get pictures of things from many, many places, and it helps bring that person alive. If you had someone in the military, it's nice to be able to put a page about that in their section of the book. Now up on the top is an old pay book. I believe that's my dad's pay book. I found it in the back of his desk. I have inherited his desk. Though it's taking up room and I have no idea what I'm going to do with it, I've still got it. This one over, the big one over on the far side, is my ancestors' discharge papers from the 83rd Regiment of Foot. He came out the year after, 1838. I was really hoping that he was in that part of the regiment that came out in 1837 and went to the Battle of Chateauguay in Quebec. But half the regiment came out in 37 and the other half came out in 38. And he came out in 38 and missed the whole shooting match. But he was discharged in 1841. And I know he had to have bought his discharge. Now, he could not afford it. He was a private. And I looked up the regiment to find out what kind of costs would have been involved for him with his paycheck. And every time he went to get a splinter removed or whatever, they charged him so many pence. And this was deducted from his pay. By the end of the month, he was lucky if he had half a shilling left. So it wasn't much money. He would not have been able to save 20 pounds in his whole lifetime as a soldier to buy his discharge. And I have a feeling that it was a shotgun wedding and his father-in-law paid his discharge just so he could get married. I have a funny feeling. No proof, just a funny feeling. Lots of times in the local newspaper, you're going to find articles about World War I or World War II soldiers, Boer War soldiers. And so if you can find a newspaper article that mentions your ancestor. If you go to Our Ontario and click on community newspapers, and that'll give you a whole list of all the newspapers across Ontario that have been digitized to date by that business. And you can click on the one in your ancestral area, and when you get to the search terms, always use the advanced search. I've learned that the hard way. You get much better results, and put in the name you're looking for as a phrase, and then don't fill in anything else, and you'll get every hit from that newspaper. And so if you've got a newspaper that's been digitized from that area, you're well away. Now, there's some that aren't on there because they've been digitized by other companies. The Renfrew newspaper was digitized put online just early this spring, I think February, and it's not on Our Ontario. It's a separate thing. So sometimes you have to put in digitized Ontario newspapers online into a Google search and just find out all the different places you can find them. But it's a good way to find newspaper articles without traveling all over the country. If your ancestor was in a conflict, a major conflict, put a picture of his medals in. A lot of times the medals are lost. We don't know who has Grandpa's medals or great-grandpa's medals. Nobody seems to know where they are. Sometimes they were pawned for good hard cash, so we may never find them. I did some work for a friend of mine yesterday, and on her ancestors page, we've got the 2 medals that everyone earned. Canada didn't have her own medals at the time, so we have the British War Medal and the British Victory Medal, and every soldier and every nurse, every person that served, whether it was here or overseas, if they had wartime service, they were awarded those medals. And you can find those pictures all over the internet to put in your family story. If your ancestor made the supreme sacrifice, his dad, if his dad was still alive, would have received his death penny. Now that was a great big bronze plaque, about like maybe like that, about the size of a sandwich plate. And it was bronze, and it had his name on it. His mom received the medals, and his dad received the penny. So there's all kinds of wonderful things that you can get to put on. Now, as far as this fellow went, the picture on the internet has somebody else's name engraved on, so I just put a little box with the real person's name on that I wanted and covered it up. And it's still what his penny would have looked like if you haven't still got it in the family.
If you do get the military records, do they list the awards that were given to a soldier?
Somewhere, usually towards the back page, it will tell you what medals were awarded. But you have to be very diligent on how to read it, because it's all in short forms. It's usually in red so that it shows up. And it's short forms. BV, British Victory. BW, British War. Okay? So you have to know how to read the little short forms. But usually it's on there, usually. And it will usually give you the date it was awarded, if it's posthumously, and it sometimes will tell you the address to which it was mailed. And that's another good advantage for doing family research, because you know where the family lived at the time.
What site is that to find the medals?
They're not all digitized yet, but if you go to the Library and Archives Canada, Soldiers of the First World War, and then click on Find a Soldier, you can put his name in. You don't need to know his rank or his serial number or anything else, just his name. And it will give you all the people with that name in that conflict. If they were deceased, go to the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, and it will tell you all about them, where they're buried, who they were, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of times there will be places to click. But if you want his records, if they've been digitized, then it will say digitized files right there beside his attestation paper. And you can click that, and it'll take a few minutes to load, because sometimes there's 50 and 60 pages. And all his dental records, everything. So all the things you never wanted to know, they're in there. But it will tell you. It'll tell you his rate of pay, everything.
They're doing it roughly in alphabetical order. And the last I heard, they were up in the O's.
Oh, good.
The surname starting with O, and they expect to be finished by about April or May of next year.
I'm behind that.
Yeah. Well, just if you're not there yet, just keep going back, because they put more up and more up and more up. Yeah.
The World War I veterans medals have the regimental number written around the edge.
Yeah, and the name, and the name, all around the edge.
Yes.
If you are at a militaria show, go through some of the military medal displays and little boxes full of medals, and read the names. See if you can find an ancestral medal, because sometimes you can. But I heard a terrible story a couple of days ago. There was a jeweler, and I can't remember where, who was caught grinding the names off of the edge so that they could be sold better for generic medals. Oh, I wish I'd known who it was. I would have got him. Seafarers down through the years. A lot of times, especially if your folks come from Devon and Cornwall, you're going to find a lot of seafarers. Any port town, you'll find a lot of seafarers. Around Plymouth, you're pretty likely to be a naval person. But it could be any kind of a seafarer. I had one ancestor who was captain of a merchant ship. And so there's lots of different kinds of seafarers. Find photographs on the internet from that era. The ships changed, what they looked like and how they traveled and how speedy they were, what their use was. So go on the internet and find good reference material. Everybody had to come over here via some means, and they usually didn't float on a log, and they probably came before aircraft were invented. And so finding seagoing vessels. The Landovery Castle was a passenger ship until it was put into service as a hospital ship during World War I. Things like that. There's all kinds of ships. here in Ontario, there was an awful lot of people, even farmers, that went down to Lake Ontario and got jobs on the lake boats. And some of them were excursion boats, some of them were coal boats. They did all kinds of different jobs on the Great Lakes. Some of them were schooners, some of them were steamships. And so take a look in the census, and if you see one of your ancestors as working on the lake boats, don't say, "What? He never did. He came from 20 miles north of the lake." Well, that's fine. He walked to work every Monday morning, probably, and or rented a horse and left it there and rode it home Friday night on his way home. But yes, they came from all over. I had people that I found out in Cartwright Township that they didn't work on Scugog. They came down and worked on Lake Ontario or Lake Erie. So. It depends where your ancestors come from. Sometimes there's very iconic things that go along with that place. Now in Newfoundland, some of the best stamps in the world came from Newfoundland, with the pictures of the cod and the Newfie dogs and the bullet. There you go, that train, that's the bullet. And so if you can find a collection of stamps, I have a collection of Newfoundland stamps that my mom gave me when I was a little wee kid. But I went on the internet and got these. It was so much easier than going through my pile of junk to find my own collection. It's not in any order. But anyway, these things will explain the place from which your ancestors came. Landscapes. My family were agricultural people. Roger's family were miners. So we have an old tin mine on the Cornish coast. And this is a mine that his people very likely worked in because it's very close to the parish where they lived. This is the first one. Up here is a little Newfoundland village, and look at the great iceberg floating by outside the harbor. And that's commonplace. They didn't think anything of it. They saw icebergs floating by until July and August every year, until they melted away to nothing. Down in the bottom, North Cave, Yorkshire, that's about the sum total of the little village, right there, what you see. And that's where my ancestors came from. On the hills, outskirts of Belfast. My people were Antrim people before they were Armagh people, and they probably knew those hills like the back of their hand. 5 minutes outside of Belfast, and this is the kind of landscape you're looking at. Windswept, barren. It's so interesting to, travel 5 minutes outside the city, and that's what you see. In fact, from our room upstairs in the hostel where we stayed, we could look out across that. You couldn't see it from street level, but from upstairs we looked out across the roofs and we could see the beginnings of that. And it's wonderful, it really is. Clothing from another era. It's not hard to find examples of what great-great-great-grandparents wore. Mind you, most of them were like these two people here, the country folk. These are city folk, all done up in their finery. Boots haven't changed much for the men. Women's shoes used to be quite frivolous, actually. And if you have a chance to go to the Bata Shoe Museum in Toronto, you can get photographs of all kinds of wonderful shoes. Just wonderful. Now, my grandmother would have loved those shoes, and she probably would have wore them. Great-grandma might have driven a Model T Ford, and so there's all kinds of wonderful photographs everywhere of old cars. You can even go to some of the car shows. Now the summer is approaching. They spring up all over the place and take pictures of wonderful old cars that Grandpa may have owned. I took Dad to the Automotive Museum, and of course, my grandpa worked for GM. He would not have driven a Model T. And Dad showed me, Dad had one of those, and Dad had one of those. So it was quite fun to see what kinds of cars he drove. Grandpa was the last apprentice that R.S. McLaughlin took under his own wing to personally teach the craft. And R.S. was an upholsterer, so of course that's what Grandpa was. And he wouldn't have driven anything but a GM car, my goodness. One of the things I thought of while I was having supper this evening was the 1641 protestation returns. Now, you may not be able to get a photograph or a painting of an ancestor that lived at that time, but you can go online and in some cases get a photograph of a protestation return. You can get lots of transcriptions, but some county record offices have photographs, and it might show you your ancestors' handwriting. Mind you, a lot of times they did not read and write, and someone from the parish wrote their name for them. But we can see here, this is so varied that it was not one person that did it. www.parliament.uk/portcullis. That's where the protestation papers are stored. They are parliamentary records, believe it or not.
Can I say it again?
www.parliament.uk and then a big slash, portcullis.
Say again?
Portcullis. And portcullis is the storage mechanism. What is it at Archives? They've got a name for their archival retrieval program. All of these come, Archeon, I think is British National Archives research, search engine thing, but portcullis is their search engine thing. Or you can go to the county record office from where your ancestor comes from. One of the things I found in the county record office in Dorset is the militia ballot lists. And everybody at one time had to be a member of the militia, same as they had to be here in the very early days of settlement. And they had to be a member of the militia. And so they are in the militia book. And it tells you how tall they are, whether or not they had a wife, how many kids, what their occupation was, what their parish was, and what year they belonged to the militia. Now, sometimes people were part of the occupation that did not have to belong to the militia, same as over here. If you were a baker with at least, a miller with at least 2 run of stone, if you were a baker, there were quite a few occupations where you did not have to belong to the militia because you were needed at home. But you will find them on the British lists because you had to be on the list before you could be crossed off. Okay? That was their way of thinking. And so you will find a lot of people in here. You will also find some men who were regular army on the list. You had to be on the list before you could be crossed off.
Can I ask what book that is?
Pardon me?
What is the name of that book?
The militia ballot list.
For what time frame?
Oh, this is 1757 to 1799.
Oh, wow.
This is volume 2, so volume 1 was earlier than that. Not all counties have published their lists. Some now have digitized them and put them online. Some, if you email the county record office, they can copy it for you and scan it and send it to you, email it to you.
How would one get a book like that? How would one get a book like that? That book in particular?
I was in the record office and bought it, but you can go now online to the record office, to their shop, and just see what they've got, and you can buy it online, and they'll mail it to you.
For that particular county?
For that particular county.
I can see that.
You have to, if you want another county, you got to go to their record office.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But see what they've got, because this is, most of the men at that time were 4'9" and 5'6", and that was it. Little guys. But it tells you as much as they needed to know for the Army. Something else you can do is write to the tourist department in your ancestral county, and they'll send you wonderful little books. Now this one is a holiday book from the West Country, but in it is photographs of the villages, sometimes the local church. Look at that, photos of the village, photos of the harbor. It's wonderful photographs that you wouldn't find anywhere else for your ancestral area. I'll pick that up later. You can write to all kinds of places, even to the parish themselves. Go to the parish page for your ancestral parish. Every parish has a page these days, and there's great photographs on it. If there's not, if all they're talking about is the real estate for sale, then there's always a contact us number. And they'll put you in touch with somebody who can tell you about your parish and find photographs for you. This is a scenic Britain, so if you don't know quite where your ancestors are from, you can kind of get a generic book from the British tourist trade. But there's lots and lots and lots of places.
If you find a Wikipedia page that's about the place your ancestor is from, if it has a picture on it, all the pictures on Wikipedia are free for anybody to use.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, Wikipedia is a great place. Questions? Yes.
One of the places I found that helps is old postcards. But the only thing is how do I document what it is? Because you turn it over and it'll say Valentine postcard, but I don't know anything more about where the postcard came from and like how can I use it?
Well, you might not have to. Depending on the style of the postcard, you can find out what era it was. And sometimes if it's more modern than old, there'll be a date written down in the very bottom from whoever published the postcard.
Well, the stamps are early 1900s. Like
Well, then there'll probably be a date on the back, right down at the bottom. The company that produced that
The
postcard.
company's there, but there's no dates.
No, well, it usually does. But if they don't, look them up. Go to Wikipedia and look up that company and find out when they were in business.
And if they're not in business anymore,
Doesn't matter.
I could just say.
Doesn't matter.
Say what
In
it
that
is.
era, that would have been Grandma's postcard.
Right.
She got that from someone who traveled, or she was traveling and picked this up, if you know that she traveled. And so this is the kind of thing that was sent. The same with old birthday cards. Some of the old birthday cards from the 1800s are absolutely wonderful. And flowery and frilly, and the work that went into them, wonderful. But yeah, it's a postcard from Grandma's postcard collection.
And then all you have to say is like it'll tell you what the publisher was, but other than that, it might
Yeah.
just say, and I have no way of knowing who I go to for copyright or.
Well, no, it wouldn't be now, because they sold them all over the world. They sold postcards all over the world. They wouldn't be now.
So I wouldn't have to worry that.
No,
if I
they
put
wouldn't
it
have to
in
worry
my-
about it.
my
Wouldn't have to
papers.
worry about it. No.
Because some of them are like certain time frames.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
my husband.
Well, I know now the calendars we get from Cornwall are put out by Salmon, S-A-L-M-O-N. They're salmon calendars, and they've been in business for donkey's years, and probably will be. But some companies do go out of business. Sometimes they're bought out and the copyright is bought with it. So you can always check and find out who owns the copyright on those photos. If you can't find out, don't worry about it. You're not claiming it as your own. You're going to say from an old postcard. So.
Because I've been able to find certain time frames when people live there, and it's
Yeah.
an actual picture
Yeah.
of the street. You know, well, they walked down the street, and here's what it looked like at that time.
Yep, that's right. And there's a whole series of books out there, not all by the same people, but they were books about the county prior to World War II. Most of them were printed in the 30s. But the photographs show the villages and the countryside as it had been for 200 or 300 years. Devon and Cornwall and Yorkshire, they never changed. Not for hundreds of years until World War II came along and everything became modernized. But if you can find some of those books in book sales, you won't find them in the libraries because the libraries got rid of all those old books. But look in book sales, secondhand bookstores, for these old county books. And the photographs are wonderful, just wonderful. Well, I'm going to be here for a while at the back. If you have any questions, please come and see me.
That was a whirlwind tour.
Yes.
But such wonderful ideas, and I hope everybody will take advantage of using that for illustrating, even if all you're doing is writing little monographs. Illustrations, it's the key. It's the key to capturing your family's interest. So thank you very much, Cher. We really appreciate you
Good.
coming out.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I appreciate it.
So we'll take a,
Could I have a minute before the break?
yes, we won't take a break just yet.
And the reason is because during the break, I'm going to try to put up a few of the images from, and maybe Steve can talk about this too. Recently, a scrapbook came all the way up from Florida and was given to the Genealogical Society, but it's very fragile. So we decided to scan it. And it's been scanned. And I intended to bring a whole bunch of printouts and then left them on the coffee table, as I frequently do. But if you go to the branch later, and rather than look at the actual scrapbook, I'll maybe open it up and just show you how fragile it is. But it will have all kinds of that's only one, newspaper articles in it, and they're from Oshawa. The family's name was Lott, Carmen and Marie Lott. He worked at General Motors for many, many years. And that guy, along with the scrapbook, was the 1947 annual dinner, the 25-year club and beyond, people who worked at General Motors for that long. And so I'll bet if you had ancestors from General Motors, like Cher does, probably their name is listed on the 3 pages here. There's a picture of the 1946 gathering here at the Oshawa Armories and the head table. It's kind of an interesting document, and this is in good shape, so you can certainly flip through this. And I printed out those names as well. Actually, I didn't even ask, but I did put a few of these things up on Facebook to gather some interest on that sort of thing, and a picture about the library. And maybe while you're having the break, I'll throw a few slides up because I forgot to bring the other printouts. But this is the book. And Steve, how did we get this book?
A lady in Michigan was in Florida, and I guess the lady in Florida passed away, and she brought the book back up and then contacted us and passed it along to us because she didn't want it to just get thrown out. She wanted it to be saved, so we're very fortunate that she thought of us.
Is the scrapbook related to the Lott family? Is that
The Lott family, but there are a lot of other families from Oshawa in here and from Toronto. There are marriages of their friends. The girls, their children went to the Oshawa Collegiate and Mary Street School. They were members of the Christ Memorial Church up on Mary and Hillcroft, thank you. So there are pictures in there. There's a picture of the Reverend in a window that was dedicated back then. But pieces are falling off the edges. I guess the rest of it's okay. But all of this will be at the branch. And because it's digitized and now it's on a key, you can have a look at it and I suppose even take copies of things that are important to you. But what I'm working on now is trying to get the names out of it and a little bit of the history. So I did kind of make some notes, become wrinkled here, and I may have even spelled Carmen Lott's name incorrectly. Yes, I did. Carmen, I put M-E-N at the end, and actually on the General Motors listing, it's Carmon, M-O-N, so I'll have to change my notes. But you can read through that too if you wish. What was on the second page. Oh, yes, and I happened to look on Canada 411, and there are 6 people with that last name in Oshawa still. The parents came from Campbellford and Springbrook area out in Hastings County of lots. So I guess a lot of families came to Oshawa to work at General Motors, but that was their...
Unintended?
That was their home territory originally. But you can have a look.
What lot did they come from?
I intended to have a little slideshow ready, but you saw us having technical difficulties, so I don't know if I'll get them up on the screen while you're having the break. But just to let you know that it's here, and really interesting. I've been fascinated with it. And to add to Sher's talk about photographs, there was another book, an Edwardian period book that I found in the library and borrowed at our branch. You should go up there sometime. Sometimes I just look through the books and I borrow a few. This one, the family, their name was Atkinson. Yes, Atkinson. And they lived in just sort of north of London, and in a little town called Hubby, H-U-B-Y. And it's fascinating to see how a modern historian got a hold of a whole bunch of glass slides, 650 of them, found in a junk shop, and then became interested in those slides and finding out about the family, wrote a whole book about it, and reproduced a whole bunch of those slides. So when you're looking for Edwardian period and even up to about 1915, and how the families lived, this book has got all these pictures in it. It's really fascinating, this book. I wish I could remember the name right now, but maybe I'll come up with it.
And we can put it on the blog and Facebook group
Yeah.
when you find the name.
But it's got the kind of pictures that Sher is talking about. If you've got family from England and that northern area, they went off and took pictures while they were vacationing in Spain. The family eventually ended up in New York. They were quite wealthy for a while. Fancy cars for those days were in the photos as well. British cars, not American cars. And but that's that family, you know. But still, some of the photos that were taken while they were on vacation, I went on Google Maps and tried to find some of the same spots, and you could actually go on Street View, like Sher was saying, and look at the same street, the same buildings the way they are now. And some are gone, you know. Even in the book, the man who was doing the research, the modern research in the 70s, trying to go back with his wife and look at the old bridge or the old waterfall, well, they were just not there anymore, you know, the remnants. Mm-hmm. And I kind of held things up for the break, but I thought...
So we'll have a break now for 10 or 15 minutes.
Nancy?
And B has some correspondence to share with us.
This correspondence comes in either via email or it comes in via the post office. What I do is I read out the first date, remember that date, and I'll say it at the end as well. Because if you want to know information on it, then I look it up by date. So this one came in on the 8th of May, and it says, I'm looking for a marriage between a William Parker and a Mary Jane Tripp. Any help is much appreciated. And that was from Joy Richardson, and that's the 8th of May. The next one, there's only 2 tonight, came in on the 18th of May, and this is a longer one. This person is really looking for Stephen Smith, living in Whitby at Concession 4, Lot 14, and his son Stephen Jr. We're living at a Broken Front 24. I'd like to know where these locations are in the land deeds and records. For example, I don't know when Stephen Smith, great name, Sr. died. Perhaps the sale of the property at Concession 4, Lot 17 would give me a clue. I also don't know where Stephen Smith Sr. is buried, so the cemeteries would be close to Concession 4, Lot 17. I think Stephen Smith Sr. died before 1847 because only juniors listed on the 1847 city directory. I'm assuming they are brothers because there are other Smiths, Silas, Abraham, John, and Daniel. Also in Whitby in 1837 are William Smith and Edward Smith, all on broken fronts. Could William and Edward be related? I don't know where Broken Front 21 and 28 would be relative to Broken Front 24. And I also, in 1837, there's a widow Smith living at Concession 8, Lot 10. I mentioned widow Smith because Stephen Smith Jr. moved to Concession 8, Lot 16, Raglan by 1847. So there could be a relationship. Could widow Smith be Stephen Smith Jr.'s grandmother? When did widow Smith stop owning Concession 8, Lot 10? What cemeteries would be close to this property? So this person wants a lot of information. He also talks about the Browns Toronto City Home District where Stephen Smith Jr. was living, and his daughter Lydia Smith, who was born in Whitby in 1843 and is buried in Hardin Cemetery. It goes on a lot about the same things. And the fact that he knows that he borrowed money from Millicent Dingman and that Millicent issued a court order for the principal sum. So he's got a lot of information on his Stephen Smith. It's just that he doesn't know where exactly he lived in Whitby and where his possible relatives were. This came from a Scott painter, and it was the 18th of May. That's the last one.
Okay. Gonna make a mess of that one?
It's a biggie.
Sheila, do you have a treasurer's report for us?
Okay, so this is right up to date for today. Our balance of our current account is $6,911.24. The deposits for May and the first week of June, $499.12, and our withdrawals for the same time period are $1,278.02.
Thank you. So there's a whole bunch of DNA special prices for Father's Day. When I looked on Ancestry, they've got a $20 off on the Ancestry DNA test, so I threw this one in here for you to look at. But some of the other companies have now announced theirs, so if you're interested, go on the company's website. So at this point, I get to do the little short mini presentation, and I'll try to keep it really short if I can figure out how to bring it up.
Is it on that USB key?
It's on the USB key.
It's E, the letter drive
There,
is
removable
E.
drive E.
Okay.
I need a magnifying glass here.
That's small.
Yeah, it is a small screen.
Got that worked. So.
F5 will work too.
What I'd like is the presenter notes too. How do I do
yes,
that?
right.
Tools.
Oh, I don't know in this program.
Okay. Well, this will be a presentation without notes.
Okay.
So, who's used Ancestry? Everybody. Who's built a tree on Ancestry? Not as many. Okay. You have to build a tree if you're going to get Ancestry's hints. So, of those who've built the tree, you've seen the shaky leaves. Now, they call them shaky leaves, but they're not shaking very much for me anymore, I have to admit. Maybe they shake for a half millisecond or something. But that's how Ancestry says, we think we found a record that belongs to this person. So, it's a hint, it can be useful, but I want you to know about the limitations for it. And I didn't realize some of this stuff up until about 6 months ago. So in Ancestry's actual support article, they do say that not all databases are included in the hints. Hints are meant to provide only basic information from the most viewed records. So I had a quick look. I went on the card catalogs. So Ancestry.ca has almost 2,000 databases. .com has a wonking great amount because, of course, that one's been around a lot longer. The British one's a little less than Canada, and Australia has a few, for a total of almost 37,000 databases. Well, I don't know about you guys, but when I see hints on some of my people, there's maybe 4 or 5 or 9 hints. You can't tell me there isn't a lot more there with 39,000 or 37,000 databases to go through. So when I typically go on and look, there is a spot where you see the hints, and this person has 2 hints. Another thing to keep in mind, they're not necessarily correct.
Usually not.
Well, it depends. If you got a really common name, boy, they can be really bad. If you got an uncommon name, it's not so terrible. So, you have to keep in mind as you're looking at these hints that if you've already found your person in Ontario, the one that came up in New Brunswick is likely not yours, and you should put it as ignored. Or you find them being registered as a birth, and the birth's off by a few years from what you thought it was, but it's in another county at the other end of the province. Yeah, you've got to use some sense when you're doing this. And the one I really love is the one that I just showed you in the last one, is you're getting hints for the person and it's under her maiden name and she's been married for 20 years. You know darn well it's not her. So here's one that I'm getting. I've got a Mary Gould. My Mary Gould was born Mary James. And they've got her being one is a census and one is a death. The death's in Addington County. Well, I don't think she ever left Uxbridge. And the census is up in Grey County, and I've already got her in Uxbridge. So you've got to really look at these hints with a very jaundiced eye. Something I didn't know, they only give you a few at a time. They just kind of dole it out to you, bit by bit by bit. So when you do get a person with hints, you should look through them and get rid of them so that maybe some useful hints would come in on the next batch. So review the hints. If you come back to the tree, you'll go, but I just did that person. How come there's another 6? It used to drive me nuts. Now I understand why. So here's a section of the my family. It's a little small, but you will notice that there's an awful lot of green leaves. I haven't looked at this section of the family tree for a long time, so I've got a bit of work cut out for me here. Something else that sometimes people notice, they're not getting very many hints for a certain branch of the tree. Well, a trick is to go in and actually do some work on somebody. And then Ancestry knows you're working on them again and they go looking for more hints. Now, when I was trying to figure out exactly which databases it searches, and I couldn't find that anywhere. But I have a big enough tree that I was kind of randomly picking people here, there, and everywhere. It seems to be birth, marriage, and death, including things like obituary collections, find a grave, gravestone inject, any religious records, the Quaker religious records that have come online in the last 2 years, a lot of those in my ghouls. And also census and the census substitutes like city directories and things like that. And I've had a lot of pop-up hints with photos that other people have attached to their trees. I have actually turned off member-contributed trees because I found it was too overwhelming in my results. But if I felt really interested, I could turn that back on. So on this gal, my Mary James Gould, I've got 9 new leaves. I've accepted 4 and I've thrown out 2. So I have more work to do. So the bottom line is, hints can be really useful, and I've had some successes with them. But they're not the only way to research, and they're not the only databases. You saw the number of databases that you can go in and search individually. So you have to know what the limitations are so you can avoid missing something that could be vital to your research. I think this is it, yes. Current slide. Gradually getting my PC fingers back. It's been a few years. And I think I just opened the same thing again. Okay.
The original might be open if you use Alt-Tab, and it'll run across the bottom.
Thank you. I forget about that.
It might still be open if you hold the Alt key down and push Tab. It'll cycle through anything that's running in the background.
And it's not working.
She must have closed
Okay.
it.
I must have closed it, yes. Well, basically, that was the end of today's presentation. I wanted to let you know what our next program will be in September. And that will be Canada 150, Oshawa's contribution to it. And it's Lisa Tarek from the Oshawa Museum who will be our presenter. The date is, I believe, Tuesday, September 6th. I may have that off by a day or two. Come the Tuesday night, and we'll be glad to see you then.
The day after Labor Day anyway, isn't it?
Yes, it's the day after Labor Day. Yes, sir?
You opened your presentation talking about the DNA.
Yes.
I recently sent in mine. When I get the results back, what do I expect to see in that information that comes back?
Did you test at Ancestry, at Family Tree DNA?
My heritage.
My Heritage, okay. Well, My Heritage actually has just put up a brand new, what do they call it? Ethnic composition, something along. It's really neat. I just got mine. And as you hover over some of the countries, you get music from them. it's really neat. It's also, My Heritage seems to have the best ethnic makeup that divides into smaller areas than anybody else at this point anyway. And it also says I'm 1.5% Jewish. I didn't know that.
It's Pat, okay?
Well, no, this is My Heritage telling me. When I first did my DNA, I did it with Ancestry. And then I paid a few dollars and moved the data into family tree DNA. And when I moved from Ancestry to family tree DNA, I was 2% Jewish. Okay. Well, family tree DNA recently redid all their ethnicity calculations, and I lost my Jewish in family tree DNA. And then I did my heritage, and my heritage actually is currently the youngest of the DNA sites. And they don't have some of the tools that the others do. That Ancestry, 23andMe, although I haven't used that one, Anne demonstrated it for us one time at our DNA group. And my heritage allowed me to put my data from Ancestry into there. And they'll do that for free. Everybody, if you've got any DNA raw data, go to Ancestry, or go to My Heritage and put it up there. What you'll get is that map. Gives you an approximate ancient ethnicity, what they figure your deep roots are. We tend to call that kind of your cocktail party discussion or your coffee table book. Where you really want to work is in the matches they give you, where you can see other people. It comes back, it says you've got maybe this amount of, a certain amount of shared DNA or a certain number of centimorgans on a chromosome. And then you start working with that, seeing if they've put up a family tree, if you recognize any names, or if you recognize any locations, because maybe the name changed, or there was a non-paternity event, or the postman rang twice, or something like that. So come on out to our DNA group. It meets the third Wednesday, which is, I have to calculate here.
Third Thursday, you said?
Third Wednesday.
Third Wednesday?
21st. We're meeting at 7:30 at the office up at the base of the NAV Canada Tower on the south field of the airport.
Oh, yeah.
And we have a map on our website, so durham.ogs.on.ca. And you can get the map to our office there.
Durham.on.ca?
Did I miss the OGS? I'm sorry. Durham.ogs.
Or OGS?
.on.ca.
Yeah, .ca.
Probably if you just Google Durham branch,
Yeah, it comes up.
it will come up.
Durham DNA?
Durham Region Branch,
OGS.
Ontario Genealogical Society.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just go into the OGS and you can find it.
Yeah. If you go to ogs.on.ca, they have a button called branches and you can get to us that way as well. Yes?
Is it accessible?
Pardon?
Is it accessible?
It is semi-accessible. There is a ramp, but unfortunately, there's a step up into the door. Go figure.
It's not too big a step, is it?
Well,
It's a step.
it's a big step for a wheelchair.
Yeah, it would be very hard for a wheelchair to get up it, I would think. But it does have a ramp up to the door. Go figure.
You wonder why they did that.
Well, maybe for hauling up equipment or something.
Well, maybe it was for hauling up equipment into the NAV Canada office. I don't really know. So everybody's welcome, and we discuss things. Sometimes we watch a webinar. Sometimes somebody demonstrates. One of the things I'm going to demonstrate is my heritage ethnicity map, so you can hear all the lovely music.
So have you paid to have it tested, or did you just port it over?
I just brought over the raw data from Ancestry.
Okay.
But you only get so many matches, and then they want you to subscribe to their...
Oh, okay. I hadn't realized that because I actually do have a subscription to
So
my
many
heritage.
matches, they'll give you, show you the families and so on, but I forget how many they allow you, because I think I went down to the fourth one, and then it wanted me to get a subscription. The other thing is, did you get your results from Living DNA? I was rather disappointed in what I received.
Okay, Living DNA out of Britain is probably better for British people, and I think recent British. I have got mine. I was saving it for the DNA group so we could look at it together. In other words, I haven't gotten around to it yet.
What was the cost for it? What was the cost? Too much.
The cost of Living DNA?
Yeah, 169, I think.
Yeah, I think I got it for a show special down in the States for $129 US.
You got it.
US.
Well, that's 300 Canadian.
Well, it is now, isn't it? And, but that was 2 tests. That's the mitochondrial and the autosomal for me. And it would also include Y-DNA for a man.
But it's still in its infancy, really, because
It
there
is.
are a lot more features to come, they promise, so I haven't complained.
Yeah.
I felt that I didn't, at this point, I didn't get my money's worth, because I've already done FTDNA, and I've done Ancestry, and I've downloaded and uploaded to JPatch and to MyHeritage.
Yeah, okay.
I would hold off on it if it's just.
I think you have to be a recent immigrant, really, for it to show, for us. If you've got deep North American roots, I honestly am not sure that Living DNA in England is going to help all that much, because the whole point for most people was to find out which county in England.
But see, that's what it doesn't do, and that's why it disappointed me, because it showed that I'm half Eastern European, and then it broke it down into Ireland, Scotland, instead of England, which was surprising to me, because mine were from England. So it was different.
It was
but
different
didn't
from
break
what you
it down
expected,
regionally. I thought
yes.
it would break it down more into counties, and then it showed a regional area in England, and it showed out the Midlands more than the northern area. So it was disappointing in that sense.
So it wasn't what you expected, really?
Not at all at this point, but they do tell you that there are more features coming.
Now, what I'm looking forward to is the breakdown in Ireland, because they've got a population project going on right now where they actually hope to be able to break Ireland down. Currently, they do Northern Ireland and Ulster and Ayr, and they hope to do it by all the old counties once they get this population study done. And I know they've got a population study going on in mid-Europe, mid to Eastern Europe, and some down in Africa too. So eventually it will, it will hopefully be very useful. But I'm wondering if us, as having deeper roots in North America, will be so diluted from all the contributory families that they may not be able to pick out specific locations, that we wouldn't have inherited enough DNA from 5 times great grandma from Norfolk, England. You know, it may not show up. So, here's some of our other upcoming meetings in October, November, and December.
Back it up to when you're done that.
Back it up to?
Yeah, there.
Oh.
Oh, yes. Thank you. How did you know?
I saw it go through when Dan was.
I guess I pushed too fast.
Okay. Yes, October 14th. I can actually name our speakers now because I've had acceptances from all 3 speakers. We've got Tammy Tipler-Priolo, Janice Nickerson, and Marion Press are all coming to talk to us. There'll be 4 lectures. I don't remember all the topics, but you'll be getting more of that in September. And it will be going up on the blog and the Facebook page, Facebook group before September, so you get a chance to look at it and decide whether you're going to come. And I hope you will. I think it's going to be a good day. So there's the DNA interest group. And that's exactly what I was going to talk about, was living DNA and my heritage DNA. And if we get new people out, we always discuss their problems and questions too. And we don't have time for this.